So good evening, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to host this panel, a panel of distinguished guests, who doesn't need any introduction. So generally, people say that in a panel, the person who hosts the panel, his job is the most difficult one. At least that's what I have felt when I used to, host the panels, and I used to prefer being on the other side of the discussion most of the times and being a panel member. But this time my job is pretty simple because these are all distinguished gentlemen and we would love to actually hear from them, and in fact, I was trying to, think through as to what sort of questions which I can ask. And then with great difficulty, I narrowed down to a few of the questions because the topic is such that, and the time constraint that we have, it can't, you can't ask more and more questions. But however, I'm sure that all these distinguished gentlemen will be able to offer their glimpse and the thought process behind which some of the decisions they take. And these decisions are path-breaking decisions because it impacts our life in a big way, and it impacts the policy of the country as such. Which is what is really important. So with that sort of a prelude, let me just directly jump into some of the questions which we have. So Mr. Brijesh Singh, who's the ADGP of Maharashtra, is an old friend, and he's one of those speakers whom we all love to hear from. And sir, we would like to hear from you. Obviously, financial frauds and cyber crimes are the most important things which people are worried, and particularly in the payment space. We would like to understand about your thought process on the reporting of these frauds, the investigation of these frauds, how some of these can be hastened, how some of these can be prevented, and what are the advice which you would like to share with our audience and to the larger population on what can be done from a public point of view to prevent some of these things.
If you look at these two systems which are clashing, one is the system of attackers and one is the system of protectors like you and probably us, law enforcement. हम लोग picture खत्म होने के बाद में आते हैं, but by the time the mule has taken out the money. But however, you see that in the adversarial ecosystem there is real-time coordination. So the entire kill chain works in real time. You want an exploit, you can get it. You want to rent out something for a DDoS, you can get it in real time. However, if as a law enforcement officer, I want something which is on a server in some country for a legitimate reason, the average time is 1300 days, even with an MLAT. So it's a question of systems. Now, rules and laws, whenever they have to be made, they are for facilitation. Like look at laws of traffic. They are made so that traffic is facilitated. The irony is that laws become an impediment. Laws are essential, regulation is essential, but they become an impediment when we want to investigate, when we want to share data. For example, privacy. Earlier, you could get any of whose data or anything. If something is hosted on a malicious server, IP, you could get this data. With GDPR, all that is redacted. You try and get whose data, you can't get it today. So investigation is becoming more and more difficult. Everything is getting encrypted. That's called the going dark problem. So law enforcement doesn't have any access to these things. Similarly, while regulation enhances privacy, it becomes more and more difficult to investigate. So what should be done on the regulatory side? I think regulation should become real time. For example, reporting, we have a particular gap of reporting. But why can't reporting be real time? Like if something really has happened, if something is pinging your SOC, why shouldn't it automatically be told to the regulator? Or why can't we have a kind of fraud risk API? Tanzania solved this. There used to be SIM swap problem. Like somebody basically gets your credentials and gets a second SIM card on your name, gives a portability request, and by that time does transactions on your name. Now what Tanzania did, it has an API which checks with the telco whether there has been a SIM swap, SIM change request or not. If there's a request, it stops payment. Something very simple, real time, don't need to do anything. So regulation has to be automated. And it also has to be risk-based. While you do this, you can't stifle innovation, you can't stifle business. So somewhere we'll have to give them a regulatory sandbox wherein you encourage reporting but don't punish people. So let it be risk-based, let's encourage people to report, and let it not be punitive. You should encourage that you have reported. Otherwise, for any body corporate, it becomes a question of business risk, it becomes a question of reputation. And hence, we'll have to create these protocols where information is shared real time, especially regarding the cybercrime ecosystem. If information is not shared in real time, you are not going to, tackle them. So my final word is that there is a cybercrime ecosystem, and till we do not bring down this cybercrime ecosystem, today it is the most profitable business in the world. It is $10.5 trillion this year. The GDP of cybercrime today is $10.5 trillion, almost thrice the national GDP of India. For problems of such a scale, you will really need to have real-time regulation. That's it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brijesh. I'm sure some of our audience will also have a lot of questions to you towards the end of the session. And they would like to leverage on your expertise and understand more about some of these aspects. But very important point that you have articulated. Moving on, Mr. Narendra Nath. Mr. Narendra Nath is part of NSA and is associated with the PMO's office. Sir, it should be a really tough time with the way that geopolitics is evolving in the last few years. So given this sort of dynamics and given this sort of not so friendly neighbors and sort of cross-border attacks, which all the financial institutions are fighting really hard to prevent, how do you think the regulation should evolve from your point of view, from a country standpoint of view, and how do you think that we are geared up as a nation to prevent some of these attacks?
Yeah, before I come to that, we had this, you're referring to the geopolitics and the recent operations that have happened. Cyberspace, you would have seen this was well protected in the sense that though there were a lot of attacks, a lot of incursions that were happening, but
Correct.
Still, all the services were functional. That's a reflection of some of the infrastructure that's got created. It's not something that happens just because some operations are going to start. You've started doing something at that particular point of time. That doesn't happen that way. It means there was a thought process that's went in behind a decade back, and based on which some infrastructure got created across the country, where you have visibility into the traffic that's happening, and then based on that, you started taking proactive actions, and it's a coordinated proactive action with entities across all sectors. So there's a lot of work that happens that might not be overtly visible to all the people across the world, country, but that happens. So, having said that, one of the things, we also, there's a lot of thought process that goes on in an organization. You find that, the regulators, for example, the regulation has been there, but the focus of the regulation has been on quality of service, looking at competition, on pricing. These are things that the regulators across sectors have been looking at, basically. And the thing is, it's recently, the regulators have also woken up to the fact that cybersecurity, for example, is also one of the mandates that they should be looking at. Because I think when you look at security piece of it, safety is another part that the regulators are looking at. Security is one part of a functional requirement of a delivery of a service or a product. And that is something I think a lot of regulators have started recognizing, that when I talk of service delivery or a product delivery, security is also part of the regulation that I have. So for example, you take the case of the power sector, Already the Power Sector Act and the rules provide for, providing, reliable electricity, safe electricity and all of that. Might not be talking about cybersecurity there. But having cybersecurity is part of the reliability and the safety of the electricity provision. So though it doesn't talk of it, I think the regulator has to realize that cybersecurity is also a mandate that they have to exercise, though it's not specifically mentioned. And that is something that all the other regulators also recognized. Recently, we started looking at the device security ecosystem, and then looking at how do we, across all the sectors, how do we, like the health sector devices are there, or any other sector, transportation, civil aviation, all of that. What we find is, when we did a survey, we find that everybody has a standards making. They talk like medical device without a standard, it can't be deployed. Even the railways, for example, without standards, testing, certification, you can't deploy railway equipment. So the same thing, so there is already a ecosystem in the country for regulation in terms of having standards, certification and testing and all of that. cybersecurity also should become part of that. Either you enhance the facilities that already exist within the sector, or you create additional facilities to that. That is one part, I think, that's how the evolution should happen. And that is happening. Let's see, on yesterday only you find that the Ministry of Power, the CEA, has come up with a draft guidelines for cybersecurity. I don't know if you're aware, I don't know how many of you are aware, but just look at it. Yesterday only they've released that. And that is how you find that the CEA, in addition to that, they have also done that. That is one piece. The second, what I'm finding is, earlier it used to be hands-off policy in the sense that you leave it to the industry to do what they have to do. But now the governments have recognized that they have to step in and then see that there are certain basic minimum things that people have to do. They become more prescriptive in terms of telling, this is something that so you look at the yesterday's guidelines, if you go through that, you will say that they should have a CISO. It specifically says the CISO of this particular level, the reporting structure of the CISO, and then alternate CISO at a particular point of time. You cannot have that particular position vacant. It's very prescriptive. So you find that regulations also have started becoming more prescriptive from the governments that, cybersecurity would be addressed. So there are other things also in terms of, like in the telecom regulations, you will find that only certified devices have to be getting into the equipment has to be getting into the networks. It's very prescriptive in the sense. It's not providing a guideline that you should do this. And if you are in violation of that, there are penalties in that. So that is another part, I think, that's how the regulation is happening. Having said that, it's not that across the sectors this is happening. The maturity level is different. So from the national perspective, and because digital India is something that's going across all sectors, and it becomes a national security imperative when you have more volumes and large-scale deployments happening, and it's going to disrupt the functioning of the country and the viability of that particular sector. What we require to do is that across all sectors, we have to bring up the maturity level. So it means that, let's say, the financial sector that way is much more mature than the other sectors. But then we'll have to have certain things happening like this. So this is how I think the regulators in the other sectors have to wake up to that fact that cybersecurity is their baby. They have to own up to it. If they don't have the expertise, they can take help of domain experts, but still the work is theirs and they have to do it. And that is something I think, that's how I think in the other sectors also, they have to own up to that and get that done. So this is how I think the whole regulatory landscape is happening. And from the national security perspective that he talked about, is for us to create, national level infrastructure. We already have created certain in terms of probes being deployed in the networks for getting visibility into traffic, so that we are in a proactive way. Because of that, we have, whenever an incident is happening in a particular entity or something, we have visibility into that. In a proactive way, then we are able to alert other similarly placed organizations which have similar type of infrastructure in terms of software and hardware, that this is something that's happening and these are the mitigative measures kindly take so that you are not affected. Because that threat actor who has started there is also going to doing a scanning exercise and finding out which are the other entities which are similarly placed, and he would also actually attack those. So that's why we have to take these proactive measures to see if we protect the infrastructure and isolate if there is a breach, isolate that breach so that across the nation we don't have a nationwide effect that's going to happen. So at the national level, this infrastructure has been created, but then I think on a continuous basis we have to upgrade and update. It's a sense that you've created. It's not static, and that is one. And then we all, and in all the sessions we have been talking of all the new technologies, that emerging technology in terms of quantum and AI that are coming up, and that is where I think the regulatory aspects to look at, let's say the quantum part, because banking and financial sector, for example, it depends on encryption. And with the post-quantum era, then encryption is one part. So here also then I think proactively we have started working in this area in the last around 7-8 months. We have had a meeting in our office and to look at this aspect. The National Quantum Mission had come, but they were looking at a lot of developments other than the security piece. So we had a meeting on regarding the security, and the task force has been created in the Department of Science and Technology for the safe ecosystem for post-quantum safe ecosystem. And now under that 2 subcommittees have also been created. So where we are looking at the migration path, how to do it. And the second is also testing infrastructure, the standards and testing infrastructure that's to be created. So here also I think there will be some sort of a prescriptive mechanism that you should have. with some pilots and happening all of that. So I think the regulator has to pitch in here also and see that how do I do this? Because this is not something that will happen, again I say, happen overnight. We'll have to have some pilots happening, and for that a regulatory sandbox that you talked about has to be created. So these pilots do happen. And then we also have this clear-cut roadmap, and then get this done. So I think the regulator has to be on his toes and understand new technological developments that are happening, and see that all these interests, whether it's a nation-state actor that you're talking about or an internal actor, I think you'll have to protect this thing. And finally, I think one piece is that secure by design is something. Right, as I said, the secure functional requirement, and right at the beginning, you have to design security into all the services and products that you're designing. That's important, actually.
So thank you so much, sir. I think some important takeaways there. Definitely, India's infrastructure is pretty robust, and by scripting certain minimum mandated approach, so I think the government is ensuring that a basic level of acceptable hygiene is there in the ecosystem. I think further. We also get regular alerts from entities such as Certain, which is the infrastructure which you're talking about, which ensures that even there is some kind of a impact at one area is also broadcasted across the country, and people can take a lot of preventive actions. Thank you so much for your insights, sir.
Yeah, but I'm exceeding my time maybe. That alert part you have said, lot of time what you see is that NCIPC or Certain would be giving a lot of these advisories, but there would be some organizations which would not be making sense of those advisories and actually taking action on that. That's one part, the capacity building part. And that's where I think another part and very important part is, we have not been prescribing what are the minimum educational qualifications or training requirements for, personnel who are getting deployed. That is another area I think that we have, I don't know if you're aware of that NCIPC, QCI, CAF, capability CF framework that's been created, conformity assessment framework, where you have some 19 domains in which you can get certified. And I think we should actually migrate towards that, saying that we identify these roles and then say these are the skill sets that are required and people get certified, and then say for these job roles these certifications are required. And that's something that over a period of time we'll have to start moving. Because finally, it's the person who actually makes a difference in the organization. He brings in the technology and the processes. So I think this is another area, I think, where we have to agree.
Completely agree with your views. Just moving on to the regulator, another regulator which is SEBI. We have Mr. Avneesh Pandey, who is the ED of SEBI. Sir, cyber resilience, so that is something which I'm sure, every organization, at least on the payment side, at least on the technology side, which leverages digital technology to its fore, is heavily relying on. So what are the guidelines as a regulator that SEBI is thinking or planning to introduce or recently introduced in terms of cyber resilience, and how it is important for you to ensure that all the market participants adhere to the cyber resiliency? Because we have one of the biggest share markets, with both NSE and BSE operating. So as a regulator, I would like to understand what is your thought process regarding this and, ensuring that all these actors within the, the ecosystem of this share trading, so adhere to the cyber resiliency frameworks of SEBI.
So, Mr. Narendra Nath has put a lot of onus on the regulators to pitch in. Yeah, indeed. So we are.
What I say is that the current laws, they're so generic. They provide you complete powers, independence to especially legislate or what I mean, provide regulations on cyber security. You don't have to look anywhere else.
Yeah, so there are plenty of frameworks to choose from. So there are frameworks being created by many of the regulators. So, but when you talk about resiliency, so resiliency is a very complicated mechanism, and it's a very different thought. Many a times I have tried to bring in resiliency based on certain discussions, but to my mind, as I also evolved to think on those. So resiliency is basically an interplay of technology, teamwork, and trust. technologies is something which are going to evolve. So today we are going to have an AI, tomorrow you will have using a blockchain technology, and technology is something which is growing constantly, and people are coming with newer solutions. The trust, and I would come to the trust, all these technologies that I'm building is to ensure my customers are given the services which they would like to have it uninterrupted. Now, so an uninterrupted service, a service on which if they have a problem, they can remediate. So there is a resolution of their services, and perhaps build something on the teamwork, because you need a fair amount of people who understand what is to be done. So there is a, very broadly saying, there is an interplay of these things. But coming to the regulatory aspect, when as a regulator we need to think and ensure that resiliency is built, our first prerogative is to check the governance aspect. In most of the organization, when we talk about implementation of cyber security, we look at first thing is is the governance. Where sir said that sometime even regulator has to prescribe that you should have a CISO. Now, by building a CISO, by creating a post, we are strengthening the governance process that would come in. Last year, we came up with a cyber security and resilience framework at SEBI. And when we were started to have a dialogue, it was a pretty interesting discussion where we not only brought in our stakeholders as in our regulated entities, we tapped into the auditors, because those are the ones who is going to audit the framework which we are going to put. So we got those auditors. We got into the supply chain part, the suppliers of the software, because these are the important aspects which are not regulated by us, yet they make a lot of sense. So we got them into the system. Then we, of course, we had a good deal of experts coming in, and in the end, we kind of co-created SEBI CSCRF, as we call it, which is, I put it in terms of Lincoln, created by the ecosystem, for the ecosystem, and of the ecosystem. Yeah, thanks for that. So it is that kind of framework which has been put in place, and we have been seeing there's a lot of traction being built, and most important thing that we came to handle post the CSCRF is the capacity building. We don't have adequate number of people who are trained on cybersecurity to deal with this kind of frameworks, implement these frameworks. So through NCSC and Rashtriya Raksha University, we have been conducting training programs through NISM, and ensuring that our ecosystem, securities market ecosystem, which is quite a complex ecosystem to mention that, we have adequate capability in terms of manpower is being built. Last thing that I would say here is, sir, you mentioned about regulatory sandbox. Now, that's a very important piece because many a times people come up with some solution and they really don't know how secure it is. They get into doing a VAPT, which is a point-in-time exercise. VAPT gives them the bugs which are there. But certain technologies which are newer in nature might have some capabilities which even VAPT cannot capture, because VA is far easier, PT is totally human dependent. We are trying to build a cyber range where these checks can be done when a new software is to be launched, and we are looking at operationalizing it so that our ecosystem remains slightly agile and they are able to harness these innovative solutions that come in our way.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Just moving on to Ramesh. Ramesh, as CISO of BSc, I would like to pick your brain in terms of so what you guys do in terms of steps at your end to protect investor data, also maintain investor confidence, because we see a lot of attacks such as this pump and dump and those kind of things. So from an awareness point of view, what are the steps which you guys do? So I think if you can comment few things on that aspect, it will be really helpful for the audience.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So my senior speakers all spoke from the other side of the table, and we are the other side, like from the exchange side, we need to comply with all the regulatory guidelines issued by our regulators and government, right? So if we start thinking about what is the importance of cyber resiliency at the operational level, cyber security management is kind slowly means losing its value, because resilience is the way to go. Because many of the organizations, they have cybersecurity setup. In spite of that, they fall prey to very devastating cyber attacks. So with that thought process in mind, our regulators have come up with cyber resiliency guidelines. Just to adapt to that, our approach will be, in fact, more proactive. We will try to implement a cyber resiliency mechanism beyond regulatory requirements. What I mean is, like, resilience is simple. One system goes down, other systems should help you to ensure that your systems, networks, and your business is running as usual. So thought process and the strategy will be right from the design of the application. The application should have its own inbuilt resiliency, and the system on which that application is running should have resiliency, and the networks which are helping the systems to communicate, and the data, the data lying in that system should have resiliency. This is a kind of technology level resiliency architecture and design we ensure to meet the regulatory as well as a proactive approach to ensure that organizations are effectively countering any cyber menaces. Second is process level. So Avneesh sir talked about governance, right? So governance level resilience is also very much important. Based on the guidelines and the directions we get from the regulators, we ensure that governance aspects of policy making in line with the best practices and regulatory guidelines, and implementation of those policies in true spirit, and getting those guidelines and implementations properly audited and assessed. That gives a assurance to the management, to us as a cybersecurity leaders, and to the regulators that things are happening the way it has been directed, and things have been happening the way it is expected. So that kind of governance piece is ensured at our level. And one most important point made by Brijesh sir is continuous. That is the way of handling cyber security issues, to ensure that there is no periodic or a kind of what you call quarterly, monthly kind of aspect in cyber now. Every minute, every day, every month, we are exposed to cyber attacks and threats. The only way to go is make it continuous. Be it governance, be it compliance, be it the very security operations, way is make it continuous. With that thought process, what we do is we bring in, based on the guidelines and the proactive approach, we bring in something called continuous threat exposure management. This is some of the approaches which are best practices coming out in the industry. They really help us to bring out what is the real risk. The risk-based mentality will also help the organization to be more resilient. And with that, technology resilience, process resilience, and the most important in people resilience. That is also very much important. I think Narendra sir also highlighted on the resources and skill set part, right? So even if you have best of class technology and best of class processes, if we don't have right skill sets and right people to handle and manage those systems, again this will also create a kind of weakness in the resiliency system. So having a resilient manpower, resilient leadership is also one of the aspects we should have as a proactive cybersecurity management. And most important, having said all these resiliency factors at people, process, technology, most important point to the industry is any organization nowadays is interconnected. It has got a lot of dependency on the other organizations. Like in case of we as a critical infrastructure and CII of the nation, so we have dependency and interconnectivity to the other CII sectors, like telecom, like power sector, And all these sectors, anything happening in the one sector will have its cascading impact. So that's a point that Narendra sir has made at the national level. Cybersecurity reference frameworks, cyber resiliency at national level. That is also one of the aspect as a means proactive methodology we adopt to have anything happening in one organization. That information is shared with other regulatory entities and other bodies who are interconnected, who are interdependent, so that that attack can, that intel, that information can help the other organization to quickly get ready to counter that effect not coming to their environment. A kind of information sharing and shared responsibility. These are one of the point I thought of sharing. And most important, as you talked about, awareness. So people empowerment, not only cybersecurity team, the employees of the organizations should be given a topmost and very effective and efficacy related training, so that many of the employees, we talk about a lot of frauds, Brijesh sir talked about, it boils down to users' ignorance and not knowing the best practices, and hell lot of frauds are happening, right? So that may, a person, a human being who is weak at awareness, not only create problem for himself, right? He'll also create problem for the organization as well. So those individuals and the people should be given a focused awareness training. And in this aspect, as part of the collaboration based on regulatory guidelines, we have initiated something called a kind of market service, market SOC, Market Security Operations Center. This concept is very unique in our country. And of course, from the guidance of our regulators, SEBI, NCPC, and certain team, we have established a market SOC just to provide and handhold the entities which don't have cybersecurity skill sets and a kind of onerous in their organizations. It is running very well. As I speak today, it's close to 230 plus organizations are onboarded to that market SOC. It's a kind of collaborative initiative with the help of our regulators. So this, stitching all these points together, what I talked about, we can ensure we adopt to the resiliency in the form of people, process, technology-wise mechanisms and design, and ensuring we have closely collaborating with the other organizations and ecosystem, and then and also ensuring compliance to all our regulatory guidelines.
Thank you, Ramesh. I think the concept of market SOC itself is a very brilliant concept. I think we at NPCA is also studying that, and taking some help from BSc to try and see if we can replicate some of those best practices at our end as well. And that will, we'll reach out to you in case some support is needed. I'm taking that liberty. So we've kind of run out of time. We have about 5 minutes. While I have a huge laundry list of questions, I'll keep that aside, because if I go through with them, then we'll not have time for audience interaction since we have such an august panel. Just kind of, if it's okay with all of you, open up the session, for the participants, for the audience to ask any questions. My only request is we might have time for might be about 2 or 3 questions. Any of you who have questions, raise your hand. You will get a mic and you can ask your question. Don't ask a question which is built into a question which is going into a loop or multiple questions. Keep your questions very simple and straightforward so that the panel members can give their insights into those questions.
Yes. Can I have a mic brought here, please? Right in front. My question is to Mr. Narendra.
You can have it. We have another mic.
Okay.
Yes,
Give it, sir.
just a small question. I just wanted to understand whether, India is self-reliant or are we dependent on foreign technology for cybersecurity?
A very tricky question. Yeah. I mean, you're very aware, one thing is that you go back a couple of years back or 3 years back, you'll find that bulk of the products and services are from foreign companies. It's a fact, you have to acknowledge. But over the last few years, we find that there are many companies. I think more than 300 Indian cybersecurity firms are there, and many of them are product companies also that have come up. So that's a good sign. But having said that, one of the things is there's a challenge whenever a new company comes forward, and that's where all of you are also involved in this exercise of having Indian companies, is to provide a platform for those products to be tested and and proven, so that they have then later on deployment. And if you look at the somebody comes with a new product or a new service, and then you say that, show your previous experience, it becomes very difficult for that person to show it. So I think this is where we should get into this mode of co-creation, in the sense that he does bulk of the work, but later on, after the deployment, even if you do a lab testing and all of that, once you do a deployment testing, then you will find that there are lots of things that happen. And that's where the co-creation part of comes. I think that's one mode we should get into it, to see that we have more number of Indian services coming in. And that's important. And then I think we have sufficient talent. It's not that we don't have a talent. And it's our talent, that's running all the foreign products also. Bulk of the products that are coming in, you'll find there's a lot of Indian talent that has developed these products. So it's not that it's developed because of lack of talent that we don't have products. It's because that we don't have that system where we facilitate, the maturing of those products. And then, based on that, others also start deploying.
I'll take 30 seconds to add.
Sir.
30 seconds to add.
Yes, possibly.
See, look at the money we spend on innovation. So look at the new patents in AI or cybersecurity. We are hardly finding any. So as a percentage of GDP also, our spends on R&D are very low. Though RBI cybersecurity framework is also talking for utile technology investments, wherein you invest in cybersecurity, which is going to, help you ultimately. And second thing is setting of standards. We don't have a body like NIST or anything which is setting up security standards. So we should have our own security standards, and then we can think of productization. Because we are neither innovating, nor setting the standards, nor creating products. However, but let me tell you that cybersecurity talent in India is world class. So I've been in this field for almost 2 decades now, and I'm seeing a sea change. So you get world class talent here now.
Thank you.
I think we might have time for just one more question, one last question. Anyone else?
Since there is no question, I'll just build on that.
Please.
So,
please.
So basically, security solutions today are seen as a cost. While IT spend is seen as an investment, security spend is seen as a cost by most of the organizations. And that has to change. We need to understand cybersecurity investments. Spend is also an investment in building the customer trust and building the resiliency, and then the entire narrative changes. So to ensure that, at least in securities market, people are spending X portion of their IT spend on cybersecurity. So we have been slightly prescriptive there, and we have mentioned a percentage of spend that should go in cybersecurity as part of the IT to facilitate that new technologies do get developed within the country, and people are actually deploying them with knowing well that they need to spend that money.
So there is also a waking up that's happened. You see the regulatory sandbox that people have been talking it across. So you'll find that formally across sectors, you'll find it's coming in the regulations. So that also facilitates, deployment of new solutions in a limited scale and then proving them. So that helps. But yes, it's a work in progress. Much more could be done. Yeah.
Thank you so much to all the panel members. You kind of come to the conclusion, end of the panel. Some important key takeaways that we have got. One is regulation to be automated. It has to be made real time, as Mr. Brijesh said. And also a lot of insights from Mr. Narendra Nath in terms of how robust our infrastructure is and how we are moving towards setting up of safety of the products and the standards in terms of testings and the prescriptive approach which has been mandated to ensure that some basic acceptable standards are maintained. And thanks, Mr. Avneesh. Your points on trust governance are well taken. And of course, the resolution of services in a prompt manner is again something which we have noted. And Ramesh, thanks for articulating your thoughts on resiliency and on market stocks. All these are really important takeaways. And we would love to have some more discussions, but unfortunately, we are run out of time. But it's been a privilege hosting such an esteemed set of panel members. And thank you so much for your valuable contribution. And looking forward to continuing our interaction, might be the days to come as well, outside this GFF as well. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you to our incredible panel. I'd request you to please come ahead for a group photo. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please put our hands together for our incredible panel?